par excellence, architect Felino Palafox Jr. of Palafox and Associates.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. And I'd like to thank Philto for inviting me here, of course, our leaders in the tourism industry. And it's a tough act to follow, the secretary. So innovative, so intelligent. And I first worked with him in Rockwell, where as a master architect, Henry Lopez invited him how to promote Rockwell. And he asked me if we have more grass than glass. And Rockwell gave more open spaces than required by government. And he came out in the tagline, more grass than glass. And probably it helped make the brand for Rockwell. And we're lucky to be working with the Department of Tourism and TIESA on some tourism projects like San Vicente. But anyway, my colleagues in the office prepared 200 slides. Only 30 minutes, so I have to speak maybe 8.5 seconds per slide. And I told the next speaker, Jay, if I can cannibalize some of his minutes. Anyway, global trends, best practices in architecture, master planning, and tourism development. This century is century of cities. The past century was century of nations. And having done work in 38 countries, and observed and visited more than 2,000 cities, in 66 countries. It helped me look at and put forward recommendations to make tourism. So next slide, please. So our two firms, Palafox Architecture and Palafox Associates, are sharing with you our research and some of our projects that we can. We have several cities in the world. Next slide. Yeah, global trends and best practices. Sometimes I call them revolutionary ideas also. The picture behind it, of course, in London, that used to be the London City Hall. It was converted into Marriott Hotel. So even old buildings, we can recycle them. And this has top 100 city destinations ranking. Number 1 is Hong Kong, Singapore, Bangkok, London, Paris, Macau, New York, Shenzhen, Kuala Lumpur, Antalya in Turkey, Istanbul in Turkey, Dubai, Mediterranean Emirates, which I did a lot of work there, Seoul, Korea, Rome, Phuket, Guangzhou, Mecca, Pattaya, Taipei in Miami, and we can start with Hong Kong, China. Hong Kong evolved from opium, trading, commercial center, tourism, regional center, shopping center, and top destination today. And it was able to evolve from one resource to other. So we can learn a lot of lessons from it, opening up the economy and so on. And taking also refugees from China, communist China when they get started. And manufacturing contingent from Shanghai, they brought it to Hong Kong, so Hong Kong became also a manufacturing center. Singapore, they were so lucky to have had a big one. Singapore was kicked out of the Federation of Malaysia. And because they were Malaysian Chinese, they were treated as second-class citizens. And they were able to develop with strong leadership, visionary leaders of Lee Kuan Yew. And I think Singapore copied the policies of Hong Kong with more landscaping. And Lee Kuan Yew even decreed that if you plant a tree and grow it for 5 years along a major thoroughfare, it was tax deductible for the first 5 years. And when we were planning Dubai, I looked at this several pacesetter cities, how they made it to the first one in 15 years. And London, United Kingdom, until 12 years ago, even Prince Charles was against tall buildings. And then most cities of Europe, they were having skyscrapers and so on. It started by Frankfurt. So they were able to come out with a very positive policy, allow the tall buildings, provided do not block the view of the Big Ben Tower of London and the Popula of St. Paul's Cathedral. But those visual corridors were established before permits were given. And the first 2 floors and the top floor with public access. So the tourists can see a panoramic view of the city in the 2 floors. You integrate it with the urban context of the surrounding. And London now has one of the best shaped skyscrapers in the world, and they keep renovating, updating. So we had a conference there on height and heritage, integrating modernity and history. Paris, France. Paris, on the River Seine, and comprising 400 different metro stations. So meaning that funding your way around is really very efficient. Daniel Burnham planned Manila in 1905. He's an American architect and planner. And his inspiration for Manila was Paris, Pasig River Seine. The boulevards of Paris, where 1/3 of the street would be for trees and landscaping. That was the Burnham plan, where the Americans were here, were following the principles of Burnham plan. His inspiration was not an American city. It was Paris, River Seine, the boulevards and open spaces of Paris, Venice, the canals of Venice, Esteros of Manila, and the Bay of Naples in Italy. So where the Americans were here, American Commonwealth, we're following the urban planning principles of Burnham. He did Baguio in 1909, and Chicago also 1909. Until today, the urban planning principles of Daniel Burnham is being followed in Chicago, but of course they keep updating it every year. And this is in Seoul, Korea, the middle of it, places for people. This used to have an elevated skyway and a road covering this creek. The mayor of Seoul, Korea, he removed the skyway, he removed the road, and made it a centerpiece of the development in the middle of Seoul, and with clean water. Central Park, New York, open spaces. These are the lungs of the city. If you compare a city to a human body, the central business districts are the heart of the city. The open spaces are the lungs of the city. The roads and transportation corridors are the arteries. If you look at Metro Manila today, I think it needs a bypass, it needs a bypass road. It to be revitalized, maybe a stem cell, maybe a heart transplant, transfer it to Clark, so people are elsewhere. So that's, I think doctors can be good urban planners. They can do a diagnosis. And the lungs of the city, urban planning principles, principle of accessibility and amenity. When you are close to a big open spaces, it's a high land value. So you should maximize it around tall buildings, so there are more people within walkable distance from a central park. So imagine New York without the Central Park and without the tall buildings around Central Park. In fact, around here, people are buying air rides. Like Donald Trump, the Trump Tower and Fifth Avenue is the tallest building there. I assume Donald Trump, he bought the air rides of St. Patrick's Cathedral, so he can be taller than everybody else. Very smart. In Venice, Italy, this could have been the Esteros of Manila, the inspiration of Daniel Burnham. Milan, Italy. We have so many, it's the design center of the world, Milan. And I think Mandaue and Cebu can become the Milan of the Far East. And Amsterdam, the Netherlands, intelligent city structure. 2/3 of Netherlands is reclaimed underwater, never gets flooded. How come they're so smart? Their infrastructure. Shanghai, China, smart vertical city. The 3 tall buildings, the architects were my professors in Harvard Graduate School of Design. So we had a lot of discussions on these projects. And some environmentalists are against tall buildings. I'm a fellow, the only the Southeast Asian Fed of the Council for Tall Building Urban Habitat, headquartered in Chicago. We're the ones certifying the tallest buildings in the world. And if you do a high-rise, it's more environment friendly. Because you collect your garbage, you get only to one point. Instead of going around 10 kilometers just to collect the garbage. You go to a destination, you don't have to go to so many intersections, so 10 kilometers of roads, just go to one point. Tourism is on top. Then the viewing decks, the restaurants, and the hotels. Then place to live, you have the residences. Place to work, you have the offices. Place of entertainment, shopping, and sometimes place of worship. You don't have to mess around with traffic around. It's all in one point. That's why when I proposed that Rockwell become high-rise instead of just copying built here, we had to change the zoning to mixed-use development. So taking it together, places to live, workshop, and time, learn and worship, so you don't mess around with the traffic anymore. And all these three buildings, the Shanghai Tower is not the second tallest in the building. It's open already. Dubai, something close to my heart. While working I was still leader for the World Bank funded Metro Plan Manila 1975 to 1977. And while working on Metro Plan Manila, the ruling family of Dubai saw my name in the World Bank report. They came in to hire me. So I had a commitment to finish the project because I had to work for that project to pay back my United Nations scholarship at UP. I worked for Philippine government for 2 years. We had more than 327 recommendations. We were the first ones to propose the light rail transit. And by 1984, we have one of the most modern LRTs in the world. And those 8 lines that we proposed should have been completed in 15 years. So lessons learned from Metro Plan Manila. I went to 38 countries, that's where the world. Lessons applied. What lessons learned I learned in Metro Manila? Coming back 40 years after, our Metro Manila is still lessons being learned. Who I already applied lessons learned elsewhere in the world. And Dubai, when we were invited, 20 of us from 14 countries. I was the youngest of this association, so we had to recreate my family there. The ruler of Dubai gave us only 5 clear instructions. Bring Dubai from the 4th world into the 1st world in 15 years. Design Dubai as if there's no oil, because in 40 years there's no more oil. Create a garden city out of the desert. We're importing gardens from Pakistan, irrigation from Germany, flowers from Holland. Number 4 was make Dubai as a pace setter city, setting a pace in the Middle East and North Africa. Everything in 15 years. The 5th one is I like very much was for every year of service, go around the world and copy. Benchmarking. So the best practices of the world are being brought up to me to the Dubai conversation. How Dubai can evolve from oil to a #1 city in the world, whatever. So 1977, people thought we were crazy. We're talking about golf courses in the deserts, the largest shopping malls, the tallest buildings, the largest airport, the largest seaports, the largest dry dock. And we were only 200,000 population. We designed Dubai for 2 million population. For water supply, road network. They now have one of the best LRTs in the world. You go to Dubai, you don't have to rent a car anymore. You can go to the LRT. But Dubai was like this in 1960. And this is Dubai today. The creek was dredged, make it navigable. The rulers of Dubai borrowed money from Lloyd's of London, leveraged against future income in oil. And that time, 1977, April 1977, Dubai had, I think more than 90% oil income, around 5% non-oil income. Today, Dubai, 95% tourism dollars, more than petrodollars. Shopping, dining, hotels, sports competitions, the best brands, they all go to Dubai. Today, for every Dubai citizen, there are 10 jobs available. And that's why I propose that Dubai is tax professional income. And they don't have problems with customs. So I have proposed to abolish customs here and make it open like Dubai. it's more democratic because the rich and poor, they pay by value tax, but the smugglers do not pay taxes. This is Dubai today, and this is artificial trip. The Burj Al Arab, the first 7-star hotel in the world. The greens of Dubai, the ports of Dubai, the gardens of Dubai, Palm Islands. Why did Sheikh Mohammed decide to do this? Dubai had only 70 kilometers of waterfront, very, very prime real estate. That also, so Sheikh Mohammed thought about increasing the waterfront of Dubai. By doing the Palm Islands artificially, they increased the waterfront prime real estate by 2,000 kilometers more. And if you go there now, it's so well developed. They have to import white sand and everything else. And that's right. Palm Islands. This is not the tallest building in the world. Originally, it was called Burj Dubai, Tower of Dubai. But they did not have enough money to finish the project. So it's renamed Burj Khalifa. The ruler of Abu Dhabi financed it, so changed the name from Burj Dubai. So again, place to live, workshop, and dine, tourism, office district in one building. And integrated energy strategy for 2030. Again, they're planning that you will not use fossil fuels to energize this future city. Now, the map of the world. The shaded areas are countries that Palafox sources develop architecture and jobs. Many centuries ago, the center of trade and commerce was the Mediterranean. The last century was the Atlantic. This century is the Pacific. So we have Asia-Pacific, Trans-Pacific partnership, and so on. And for about 300 plus years, we were the Asia-Pacific hub of Spanish Union. The King of Spain, King Philippine, outsourced the job of discovering the Philippines to a Portuguese. I think that was the first outsourcing job. and for about 100 years, the Americans made us their Asia-Pacific hub. The Japanese for 4 years, the British for 2 years. And you can see that even without a nautical map, Magellan landed here. And it's no wonder big countries, they're interested in our islands all the time. And unfortunately, we have a Philippine Coast Guard, all coast no guards, or a Philippine Air Force, all air no force. So I had a conversation with Secretary Jimenez. I support his proposal that all leisure craft, like yachts, must be taxed before 10 years. So we'll have more tourist investments, and we have more marinas and more waterfront development. It's not original, by the way. They did that in Thailand, taxed before 10 years. Now Thailand has the most number of marinas. And these leisure boats, they can also help during disasters. After Yolanda, we did not have enough boats, or aircraft as well. So the Philippines is right in the middle. And March 16, 2021, the Philippines will be 500 years old. So many of my development proposals now, I have milestone date of March 16, 2021, when the Philippines will be in the top 20 economies of the world, provided we address our challenges today, and we elect the correct leaders, the right leaders. We're number one, the Philippines, in marine biodiversity. We're number one in voice call centers, number one in sailors and seafarers. I'd like to believe we are number one in musicians. Any hotel in the world, cruise ships, hotels, I find Filipino musicians. And we are number 2 in BPOs now. And Bernie Villegas told me that we're also number 2 in geothermal energy in the world. We're number 3 in the longest coastline in the world. Some countries don't have enough coastline. That's why Dubai had to reclaim islands to create a longer coastline. Some countries like Iraq invaded Kuwait because Kuwait was blocking the waterfront of Iraq. We're number 4 in gold reserves. We're number 4 in shipbuilding. Number 5 in all other mineral resources. And number 12 in human resources. And the Filipino expats, the favored employee of kings, queens, royalties, colleges, developers, cruise ships, what have you. And they say the Filipino is the best global citizen of we are 400 times the size of Singapore. We have, and somebody commented in International Forum, June, Singapore is like a small boat with a big engine. And the Philippines is a big cruise ship with a small engine. So we are 400 times the size of Singapore, 350 times the size of Hong Kong, 8 times the size of Taiwan, 3 times the size of South Korea. From the 1930s to the 1970s, we were number 2 in Asia. So all Asian countries thought that Manila would be the city with the highest development potential as a financial center. We're competing against Iran, we have deep pockets, and Tokyo, the biggest contributor to the ADB. And Japan agreed already provided the president will always be Japanese. And what happened? Corruption, criminality, and climate change. When I was president of the management session of the 2011, our theme was mapping cultural eternity, addressing corruption, criminality, and climate change. In the past 4 years, I did have an MAP meeting or Combat Business Club meeting or Foreign Chambers meeting. Many of my colleagues in the business community keep adding to my alphabet soup. So they said, it's not just corruption, criminality, climate change, it's also poverty, pollution, too much politics, and the police. Recently, somebody added transportation and traffic, then somebody added infrastructure and competence. So if we address all these challenges, we should be in the top 20 economies in the world by 2021, when we celebrate our 500 years. And even Goldman Sachs and HSBC has forecasted that if we address our challenges today, we should be the 19th top economy in the world by 2025 and number 16 by 2050. But we have elect the right leaders with visionary leadership, strong political will, good planning, like urban planning, good design, architecture, engineering, and the sciences, and good governance. The successful cities and countries in the world, they have always traits of their leaders. Mayor Bloomberg of New York, Lee Kuan Yew, Sheikh Rashid of Dubai, the Prime Minister of Scandinavian countries. They have all those attributes. And I hope the next batch of leaders will have those traits. And global ranking in emerging cities. Previous was still the usual suspects: New York, London, Paris, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Los Angeles, Chicago, Beijing, Singapore, Washington, Brussels, Seoul, Toronto, down the line. Emerging cities outlook for 2015, Manila number 2. Number 1, Jakarta. So the rest of the world are expecting us to be number 2 in the world. But again, somebody commented, June, you are known for Miss Universe, Miss International, Miss World, but your country is also known for missed opportunities. So we hope we don't miss this time. And so March 16, 2021, the Philippines will be 500 years. Christianity and Western civilization, and even the introduction of the Western online. And Metro Manila's 450th anniversary. So Philippines at 500, I wrote a paper on this, I've spoken at the CEO Forum and some of the Rotary clubs. Philippines 2021 and beyond, the development vision, bringing the Philippines from the 20th century well into the 21st century. And when we started planning Dubai in April 1977, we talk about 3 kinds of infrastructure. Progressive infrastructure, which is international airports, international seaports, international schools, international world-class hospitals, and so on. These are the progressive infrastructure, which would really help in tourism. Then hard infrastructure, we know that, the roads and the utilities. But more importantly, soft infrastructure, the behavior of government, business permits, and so on. So when I was working in Dubai, I was representing the urban planning department, all the permits. And the rural Dubai instructed us, approve the permit in 1 day. And if anyone who has any objection, the one objecting must justify the objection in the fortnight, 2 weeks. If you cannot justify the objection, automatically approve. Because his thinking is, the businessman is his own money, his own land, his own reputation. And the one approving is probably thinking only 6 hours a day. We're only working 6 hours a day that time. In Dubai. So, speed in approving permit. Suspicion of corruption, you're out. If incompetent, they politely ask you to resign. And then all tables of government that are dealing with permits, very low, tabletop, and no drawers. So fighting corruption by design. Yeah. So the evolution of cities. Cities started as port-driven cities. So the 2,000-year-old, 1,000-year-old, 5-year-old cities, they are low-lying, liable to flooding. Like Manila, London, Paris, New York, Hong Kong, they were all liable to flooding. But other cities as well, they keep upgrading, updating the infrastructure. Then the railway cities, freeway cities, this century will be aerotropolis, airport-driven cities. That's why when we work on the master plan of Clark, we were the first ones to introduce aerotropolis, airport-driven cities. Because the best way to connect with the rest of the world, the fastest way, is via the airport. In the Schiphol Airport, real estate around the airport has now higher land value than downtown Amsterdam. So real estate around airports are provided to move around. Yeah. And key principles to tourism development planning. Enhance, leverage existing uses and strengths. And these images are the 14-kilometer beachfront of San Vicente, Palawan. We are master planning with the Department of Tourism, JESA, and the local government of San Vicente. And this is their long beach. And number 2, protect. Plan sustainably. Long-term success will depend on the quality of the environment and the unique sense of place. And again, this is the San Vicente area view. And some of the pictures they have today. But Papuya Island, for what we're doing it also. We asked our client who agreed that we will not accept the project if they build 10 cottages, more than 10 cottages per hectare. So respect the environment, design with the environment in mind. And I think this will attract more high value to tourism. Again, in Papuya, again, the respect the beachfront, waterfront. We have been recommending many landowners in the waterfront to like our recommendation. We should set back 50 meters. All the Pacific Islands are set back 150-foot high water mark. If you go to the Hilton Village on Honolulu in Waikiki Beach, I measured it myself. The first concrete is 150 foot or about 50 meters. And we should have two kinds of setback, horizontal and vertical. The vertical get the highest flooding history so that no habitable spaces below that flood line. I observed the Indian Ocean tsunami. I did some work for rehab. And all those on the ground floor, second floor were taken away by the tsunami waves. But there should be no bedrooms below the highest flood line. So it's not just for amenity and tourism, but also for disaster preparedness. And San Vicente Palawan, this is our master plan. You can see that we respected the beachfront. It's flagship tourism enterprise zone of the Department of Tourism and tourism development planning. So we try to introduce the best practices learned elsewhere in the world and lessons to be applied here. And some of the visuals. So even the mangroves, we can make them accessible. We don't have to remove them. Yeah. I have 5 minutes, thanks a lot. The 100 islands. It's 143 islands actually. There are a lot of potential there also, some work there. And connecting, providing transport links within the city and to the rural. And the Metro Locos Tourism Plan, we did this for Lawag, Paway, the rest of the Locos Norte. And after this plan came out, maybe it was promoted so much. And last Holy Week, there are more tourists than hotel rooms, then more tourists than bottled water. So it's a pleasant problem to have. Or there were tourists and toilets as well. So it's a more pleasant problem than no tourists. But you can see that if you do a good plan and promote it, you need entice tourism. And again, the 100 islands, it's full. Transport network plan, this is again in San Vicente. Road network plan. So tourism development planning, Curitiba, Brazil, a small city in Brazil. So the public transit, even tourist area, designable and bikeable neighborhoods. If you go to tourism cities, you spend more time on the sidewalks than the museums. Unfortunately, in our part of the world, walking and bicycle is not a transportation mode recognized. And connectivity. 2006, I was a guest speaker in the 60th anniversary of the United Nations in New York. It was a global peace something. So I proposed to connect all the countries of the world through bridges and tunnels. So the reaction was this crazy Filipino, what's he talking about? The next day, scientists, developers from Russia, US, Japan, Korea, and Europe, they congratulated me. My proposal was cheaper than the Gulf War. And they did not impute even the land value appreciation and the gateway cities. If you connect, let's say, the Bering Strait from Alaska to Russia, and so it would start with the Cold War countries. And they told afterward, your country will be blessed to be connected because you are in an archipelago. And with that, when I came back, I tried to connect the whole Philippines. And you can take a train with the magnet from Apari to Zamboanga in 2 hours. Shorter than waiting at the airports or going to the airport by car. So this is my dream, my vision, maybe for 2021 to 2050. And for Metro Manila, the American Corps of Engineers, they proposed 6 circumferential roads 70 years ago, 1945. Until now, we haven't seen the light of day for circumferential road number 6. I'm proposing 10 circumferential roads to connect the Pacific and West Philippine Sea or China Sea, connect Bataan and Cavite. So people coming from Cavite going to Subic, they don't have to pass through Manila anymore. And this was my paper in Harvard, Manila Metropolis 2020, maybe 2021. And we need 3 airports. Central Luzon we have Clark, 1 for Metro Manila and 1 for Calabarzon. Metro Manila and Calabarzon alone, 65% of our GDP output come from Metro Manila and Calabarzon. So we need an airport there. And the seaports, let's go quickly now. To solve the issues of Metro Manila, we should develop growth centers outside Metro Manila. And year 2000, another Harvard study, Metro Manila was the fastest growing metropolis in the world. 60 persons per hour. Delhi was only 47 persons per hour. London, Paris, New York, I think 5 to 7 persons per hour. And care, and positive impacts on tourism, we go faster now. Providing integrated neighborhoods, provide access to social services, education, health, and pension. And this is a case study for San Vicente, maybe this will be another presentation. Promote, have a world-class marketing program, and immersing and communing with nature, and strolling along the beach, for instance. That's a big collaboration, excellent collaboration among the stakeholders. Do a SWOT analysis and to get aspirations of the locals. Clustering, tourism framework strategy, institutional management, the land use plan is the starting point, and connect with the beachfront and so on. We have a lot of lessons learned on what not to do from Boracay, so we're not debating there. This is the building to open space ratio. This is what I was saying. The easement should not be horizontal but also vertical. Take the flat lines and no habitable spaces from there. So comparative analysis, several countries in the world, like in Copacabana, it's 50 meters, and so on. Miami is 50 meters. Nagran, so 50 meters. Nusa Dua Valley, 40 meters setback. 30 meters in Boracay Island, cannot even implement it. And 30 meters also. Because the fine sand in the beach took thousands of years to be where they are. Because the changing pattern of the beach, once you put concrete, they will become mud, putty. You can observe now in Boracay. Those that put concrete by the beach, they lost the fine sand. And access to the beach every 400 meters. And so on. So we just go quickly now. Waterfront development. In real estate, waterfront land has the highest value. It's 50% higher than inland. Gulf Fairway lands is only 35% higher. We have the third longest coastline. How do we treat our waterfront? Back of the house, garbage bin, sewerage. Elsewhere in the world, they create artificial waterfront to take advantage of the waterfront. And yeah, I think we don't have enough time to show all of this. But we just go up to the. Okay, Jay, I can have a few minutes.
1 day per minute. Free consultation.
Alright. So, cartooning monthly use, connected with SMX along the waterfront, maximizing public spaces, balance environmental benefits with human needs. It starts small to make big chances. Tourism and nicer planned waterfront projects, which go very quickly. These are our projects. We're starting to do more work in the Philippines now. We used to do more work abroad. And I have here, towards the end of this slides, which I'd like to share with you. Rockwell was a brownfield. It's the highest value appreciation in the past 20 years. Mixed-use development. The Mesa Eco Park, Monte Marina, is our waterfront development that we work on. And also riverfront. This is in Dubai, this is in Hong Kong. And this acquisition we won in Saudi Arabia, taking them also to waterfront. Residences in Saudi Arabia, waterfront, Qatar, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Turkmenistan, Djibouti, Bahrain. Postcards on the future. When we're not too busy, we take pictures of the uglification of our cities. And we send those pictures to mayors. And with those pictures, I call we put architectural perspectives on how they should look like. I call them postcards from the future. So like in Manila, Stella de la Reina, today, and postcard from the future. I showed this to the mayor. Stella San Miguel, in Malacanang, today, postcard from the future. We got the funding for this because the champion died, just Robredo. When he died, we got funding. Yeah. Stella San Miguel today, postcard from the future. Stella de Baco today, postcard from the future. Under the Bingham Bridge today, postcard from the future. Manila Bay today, one, postcard from the future. North Harbor today, the future. The PNR blocks today. We can remove them to beautify them. It's more pocket in London, Manila, future. Remedios circuit in the future. The Remedios street in the future. Tondo today, the future. Annapolis Street in San Juan today, the future. Postcard from the future. Annapolis today, postcard monorail. Estero in San Juan today, postcard from the future. Yeah. The mayor hired us after this. And we presented it in Berlin and Shanghai and Chicago. They cited it as a smart city of the future. They fired San Juan River today, postcard from the future. Pasig River today, the river sand of January. We identified it, Pasig River of the future. And I think we got $1 billion fund commitment from ADB to realize this. Yeah. So development is not working with aim unless spread evenly like water and piece of bread. I wrote this in my third paper in UP in 1973. Yeah. I think we all like to live in environment-friendly cities and communities that are better connected, more accessible, more walkable, more bikeable, safer, better lighted, convenient, cleaner, with mixed income, cross-generational mixed-use development, integrating places to live, work, shop, dine, learn, and healthcare and recreation and leisure, and with 24-hour cycle activity centers, and I should add tourism-oriented, tourism engaged. And these are two books, the one that I have sold out, the one that are still available. Thank you very much.